But we want to begin with NBC News confirming that an investigation into the origins of the Russia probe, closely overseen by Attorney General William Barr, has now changed from an administrative review to a criminal investigation. The news was first reported by the New York Times. The review is being conducted by Connecticut U.S. Attorney John Durham. According to the Times, this move gives Durham the power to subpoena witness testimony and documents, to convene a grand jury, and to file criminal charges. As the Times notes, the opening of a criminal investigation is likely to raise alarms that President Trump again is using the Justice Department to go after his perceived enemies. At this point, it's not clear what potential crime Durham is investigating, and a DOJ spokesperson declined to comment. Federal investigators need only a reasonable indication that a crime has been committed to open an investigation, a much lower standard than the probable cause required to obtain a search warrant. However, there must be an objective factual basis for initiating the investigation. A mere hunch is insufficient. That is according to DOJ guidelines. The administrative review of the Russia probe began in May, you'll remember, after Attorney General Barr said he had conversations that led him to believe the FBI had acted improperly. It's not clear when the change to a criminal investigation took place. House Intel Committee Chair Adam Schiff and House Judiciary Chair Jerry Nadler responded with a joint statement reading in part, "These reports, if true, raise profound new concerns that the Department of Justice under Attorney General William Barr has lost its independence and become a vehicle for President Trump's political revenge." Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley, who's been covering this story. So, Julia, explain, if you can, what exactly John Durham has seen from the time he initiated, or since the time the Justice Department initiated this administrative review in May, to make it change into a criminal investigation, which has, of course, wide-ranging implications for who he can talk to, what he can gather, the evidence he can seek.
Well, Willie, as we've been reporting, there are people within the CIA and FBI, some low-level people whose names have not risen to the top of this investigation, who have been lawyering up in anticipation of this becoming a criminal inquiry, or possibly because it already was a criminal inquiry, criminal investigation, and now we're finding out. But what exactly pushed it from being an administrative review to a criminal investigation? We're not clear, and the Times doesn't lay that out in their reporting either. But Willie, what's very ironic about this entire thing is that the same questions we're asking about this investigation are the very questions that the Durham investigation set out to answer about what became the Mueller investigation. We're talking about political bias. Is this being used as a tool from this administration to go after people who the president believes are against him, who are part of the deep state? We're also talking about a predicate. John Durham went out to see if the FBI had enough information, if the Justice Department had enough information to seek FISA warrants on people like Carter Page. And now we're asking those same questions. Is there enough information for this to go to a criminal investigation? So, again, we're back in this same spot of having to ask a lot of questions about our Justice Department and investigators and whether or not they are free from bias. Now, I will say John Durham is someone with a pretty stellar resume here. This is someone who investigated CIA torture. He's done investigations into mafia rings. But there are a lot of questions, and people I've spoken to within the FBI say there can be a chilling effect, and they're worried that the next time they are asked to investigate any kind of campaign, especially someone who may go on to hold federal office, that there will be a reluctance to be involved in those investigations, because if that person wins, you could be called before a grand jury. And on the grand jury piece, on the idea that you can now subpoena, I asked a DOJ official about that, who said that John Durham really always had the power to compel testimony simply because he's U.S. attorney, but it doesn't seem that he has up until this point. It was more voluntary, but because it's a criminal investigation, they can now subpoena testimony, subpoena witnesses, and impanel that grand jury, which will put this into a completely different category and allow them to compel more information, dig deeper than they could, say, when you just put this in the camp of the Inspector General at the Justice Department, who is also doing a review into these same questions.
So this is pretty extraordinary that the Justice Department has moved this as a top priority now. Of course, Attorney General Barr himself, not just John Durham, has been traveling the world looking into this, to places like the UK, Australia, and notably Italy, because they think there's some link there to a conspiracy between the Italian government and someone on the Trump campaign who was tricked into giving information. You had the Prime Minister of Italy, Julia, coming out at a press conference on Wednesday to publicly declare that that was not the case, that the Italian government had no role in this. But again, extraordinary that the Attorney General of the United States of America is flying to Italy to look into this question.
It's true. It shows the priority that the Justice Department is putting on this investigation. Rather than handing all of this off to John Durham, it's clear that the Attorney General sees this as a top priority. And not only have they been cleared by people like the Italian Prime Minister saying there was really nothing here to see, we saw the White House last week in that rather remarkable press conference from Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney use the Justice Department investigation, use what John Durham is doing as some kind of justification for the president's phone call in Ukraine, that this was all to get to the bottom of what launched the investigation, get to the bottom of the 2016 election. And because of that, that somehow justified the president getting involved and having that conversation with the president of Ukraine that ultimately led to him asking to dig up dirt on his political opponent, Joe Biden. So this investigation cannot be seen in a vacuum. It is something that this administration is using to justify all sorts of priorities. And then, of course, what is at the heart of now an impeachment inquiry?
Rick Tyler, this is another case where the Justice Department in this case, but also the Republicans in the House and the Senate this week, have answered President Trump's call to go chase down theories that he has. Remember, he said that the FBI agents who opened this investigation into the 2016 campaign interference were, quote, treasonous. He said that earlier this year. William Barr is working here on behalf of President Trump. There's no other way to put it.
So, Willie, there's only one reason Attorney General Barr, who's supposed to be managing the Justice Department, which is a fairly large job and one with great responsibility, where he is traveling around the world, as you point out, to personally investigate a case, tells you that the priority, it doesn't seem to be William Barr's priority, although it may be. This is the president's priority. He is obsessed with the 2016 election results for whatever reason, because it speaks to his legitimacy, and he wants to just blow up all the facts that we know that happened in the 2016 election results, which was there was Russian interference, not Ukrainian interference, although that is also a Russian story. There was Russian interference in the campaign. It was systematic. The Trump campaign unwittingly coordinated with the Russians. You have Paul Manafort, who was a campaign chairman, who is now in jail for his connections with pro-Russian Ukrainian politicians. It just goes on and on. But there's no reason Bill Barr would ever be involved in any particular case unless it was the president's obsession. And that's what's going on here. And remember, Bill Barr was the one who came out after the Mueller investigation to systematically undermine it. So he went out in advance of the Mueller investigation to put the Justice Department, or his, and I would say the president's particular spin on that investigation. He gave it to the White House before anybody else had a chance to look at it. And it sat there for days of spinning by the White House and the Justice Department to put a particular framing of what the Mueller report was. And so that is now happening again.
So, Julia, let me just clarify one thing. This is an investigation into the origins of the investigation. Is that right? Because I don't see a lot of disputing of the outcomes and the findings of the investigation. You had the intelligence agency, of course. You had Robert Mueller. The White House has disputed parts of that, obviously. But is the Justice Department saying that what this investigation revealed is in fact false, or just that it was not well predicated?
It's exactly the former, Willie. They haven't disputed the findings at all. In fact, especially because the ultimate finding was that the president and his campaign did not collude or have a conspiracy with the Russians. They're not disputing that at all. What they're going to is a Republican talking point that we've heard over the past 2 years. It was laid out in the Nunes memo. This is the idea that people within the FBI used that Steele dossier as a reason to get FISA warrants. That would be a surveillance warrant on Carter Page that then went and opened this investigation. There are also conspiracy theories that they're looking into that have been largely disproven about George Papadopoulos and whether or not when he met with a professor named Joseph Massoud, whether or not that was actually orchestrated by the CIA, as George Papadopoulos has claimed. But this isn't the only investigation they've had into these questions. House Republicans have looked into this, as well as the Inspector General, who has been looking into this for over a year. We're still waiting on those results. And then you add on top of this now a criminal investigation into these very same questions. But during this entire course, there has been no evidence that these warrants were in any way fabricated. In fact, I should just point out, in order to get a warrant, you have to have a judge sign off. And we've been able to see from those FISA warrants that those in the early days before this ever became the Mueller probe, in these early days, there were many people who came through the Justice Department who signed their names to this. It's not like this was all in the hands of one person or one political affiliation. It is even continued during the Trump Justice Department.
All right, Julia Ainsley explaining a complicated story very well. Thanks so much, Julia. Meanwhile, President...
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.